Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 8 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive coverage. The idea is to ensure that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Now, before we start, I have an important announcement. If you're looking to enroll for Unacademy's online classes, now you can avail the festive offer and get a 12-month subscription at 24,999. And if you join within the offer period, you get up to 1 month free extension. Those interested, click on the link provided in the video description and don't forget to enter the code IAS English to avail this offer. And if you want the PDF of this session, please join our official Telegram channel by scanning the QR code on your screen. After the session ends, the PDF would be shared over here. With this, let's get started and look at the first article. On the front page, we have an important article that is related to stable coins. So let's understand what are stable coins. Why is it important? What is the extent of its global adoption by other countries? Where does India stand with regard to stable coins? Stable coins are a type of a digital currency. So before we get into these details, let me tell you why the topic is in news. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman was attending a conclave of economic experts. And while addressing the gathering, the finance minister has spoken about the relevance and importance of stable coins. The finance minister has stated that the global acceptance of stable coins is increasing. Innovations in the world of cryptocurrency and digital assets is growing, and there is a wider adoption of these digital virtual assets around the world. So, this in the future will impact capital flow and how money essentially is treated. So, according to the finance minister, if India does not catch the trend, if India gets left behind, then India would be losing out. Now, this indication from the finance minister is a very big development because historically, the government of India and the RBI have been opposed to digital and cryptocurrencies and digital assets. So, in this context, you should understand what are stable coins. How come the finance minister is showing willingness to accept some form of stable coin and why India should essentially catch this trend which we are seeing around the world. Now, before we talk about stable coins, before I explain this concept, I want you to know the stand of the government of India and the RBI when it comes to digital currency, cryptocurrencies, which are officially designated as virtual digital assets. As per the current regulations of the Ministry of Finance and the central bank, the RBI, all cryptocurrencies, virtual digital assets, they are categorized under VDA, virtual digital assets. The RBI at one point even lobbied for banning all forms of cryptocurrencies, given the volatility of these prices and the possible risk of money laundering and terrorist financing by misusing crypto digital currencies. The RBI was very clear that there should be a ban on these assets. But today, in India, crypto transactions are allowed, but however, there is no legal recognition and there is no specific regulation as of now. So there is no ban per se. There is no ban on crypto transactions and the transactions involving virtual digital assets. But at the same time, it's not entirely legal. It's not regulated completely by the RBI and the government of India. So in this context, the statement of the finance minister becomes significant because the finance minister has said that current innovations that are happening in the crypto space and the global adoption of stable coins that we are seeing across several countries, this could influence the future of money flow around the world. This could become the norm in the coming years and decades that could determine capital flows and the global financial architecture. So India doesn't want to lose out. And the finance minister has indicated that probably the time has come for India to adapt to the new reality as well. So this is a big statement. From being opposed to any form of crypto digital currencies to coming around to accept a type of cryptocurrency known as stable coin, India has made a complete turnaround in its crypto policy. The RBI had come out with its own digital currency, the central bank digital currency, launched as a pilot project. The RBI was very clear that any digital currency, it should essentially come from the centralized institution, the central bank itself, and no other private crypto digital assets were to be allowed. So though there is no explicit ban on these assets, it is not entirely legal as well, and the transactions are heavily taxed in order to maintain accountability. Any transaction involving crypto digital assets in the country right now attracts a very, very high taxation rate. So this ensures some amount of regulation and accountability and helps the RBI and the tax authorities to keep a check. So the statement of the finance minister indicates that maybe India is warming up to the idea of considering the introduction of a stable coin. So that is the development. Now, what is a stable coin? Why stable coins are making so much news around the world? A stable coin is, of course, a virtual digital asset. It is a digital currency, but the difference is that its value is very stable. That's why the name stable coin. Its value is not volatile. It does not fluctuate without any reason. The stability of this coin is ensured by pegging the coin to a reserve currency. Maybe a reserve currency such as the dollar, the US dollar, or the euro, or its value is pegged to a basket of stable currencies. A basket of stable currencies from around the world is considered to determine the value of a stable coin, or its value can be pegged even to a precious metal or precious commodities. A precious metal like, for example, gold. So this gives real value to a digital asset. Now, this is the fundamental difference between your regular cryptocurrencies. A regular crypto or digital currency does not have a stable value because it is not pegged to any real asset. There is no real asset that provides value to a cryptocurrency or a digital currency. The value of crypto digital currencies, they are largely perceived, determined based on the market conditions, the demand supply condition, which means this can be easily exploited. Any number of meme coins can be brought out in the market, creating an artificial demand and scarcity, driving up its value, and the investors will cash out, and the other retail investors would essentially lose their hard earned money. And more importantly, if you look at the regular crypto and digital currencies, they are not regulated, they're not centralized. The whole concept of a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's based on a decentralized model, a blockchain model, where the ledger itself is completely decentralized and maintained by a peer-to-peer network. So these crypto digital assets, they were not only outside the purview of regulation. The problem was it did not have any real value. It didn't have any explicit value attached to it because there was no real asset behind it. There was no real asset backing the value of these currencies. It was merely based on perception and the market conditions. So there was a lot of scope for potential misuse where few entities could create artificial scarcity and demand and make a coin go viral, and eventually they would cash out and dump the burden on the fresh investors. So it would become a scam of sorts where retail investors would lose their money. And these assets, which had no regulation on them, which was hard to track as well because of the high level of encryption, it could be misused for money laundering, for terror financing, and other illicit activities. That's the reason why these regular cryptocurrencies and digital assets, they are largely used by cyber criminals. by organized criminal cartels involved in drug and arms trafficking. They are used even by terrorist organizations to move funds. That's the reason why around the world there has been a negative sentiment against crypto and digital currencies. But in a stable coin, there is a centralized regulation. There is a centralized regulation, most likely by the central bank itself. And more importantly, there is a value, a explicit value attached to a stable coin because its value is pegged to a real asset. It is pegged to other fiat currencies, well known stable fiat currencies like the dollar, euro, etc., or a basket of currencies, or its value can be pegged to precious metal such as gold. Now, this is the basic difference from your stable coin and the regular crypto digital currencies. Cryptocurrencies are decentralized with no oversight, no regulation, and there is no real value because they are not pegged to any real asset. Understood? So the first experiment with a stable coin was not first made by a government or a centralized government entity. It was actually made by a private organization, that is Facebook, which is Meta today. Facebook was the first to experiment with the Libra coin back in 2019. Facebook had conceptualized this digital asset as a stable coin, which would be pegged to a real asset to give it real value. But however, this concept flopped. It did not have wide acceptance. It was largely dismissed as a very lofty idea back in 2019. But today, countries, governments, and central banks are coming around to realize the potential of stable coins. For example, in the United States, recently the Trump administration has brought out the Genius Act. Through the Genius Act, the US and the Federal Reserve are looking to bring out a stable coin which is pegged to the US dollar at a 1:1 ratio. Meaning every stable coin which is brought into the market would be backed by $1. And this ensures that the coin has real value. And since it is subjected to centralized regulation, you can even carry out transactions. You can redeem the value of this coin. So whatever money is invested into it, or for whatever transactions it is used, it will have legitimacy, it will have a real value to it as it is pegged to a real world asset. So that is the difference between a stable coin and a regular crypto digital currency. There are many other countries which are today rolling out stable coins. For example, in the European market, European Union and United Kingdom, they are coming out with their own regulation and they are seeking to introduce a stable coin of their own. The UK is proposing its own stable coin, and the European Union is working together to bring out a digital currency which would be subjected to the regulations of the European Central Bank and the banking authorities. In UK, the Bank of England, the central bank would regulate such a stable coin. Then Singapore has also brought out a stable coin as a pilot concept. It has finalized the idea, and the value will be pegged to either the dollar or any of the G10 currencies, the currencies of the top 10 economies of the world. Then even UAE, United Arab Emirates, has rolled out its own stable coin, which is very strictly regulated by the central bank and the regulatory authorities in the United Arab Emirates. Japan has become another latest country to join the bandwagon of stable coins. Japan is bringing out stable coins for specific usage, which can be used only by government entities or few verified organizations. So across the world, you see this trend where stable coins are being made mainstream. They're being brought into the mainstream. That's why the finance minister has made this observation that around the world, important changes are taking place with regard to how currency is treated, how currency is valued, how transactions will be carried out, how capital flows will be determined. So if India doesn't catch the trend, we would miss out, we would lose out in the coming days. So probably The finance ministry will work with the RBI to keep the central bank digital currency along with introducing a separate stable coin which can supplement each other. The central bank digital currency of the RBI, which has been brought out as a pilot project, it can be supplemented with a stable coin that is pegged maybe to the Indian rupee or pegged to a basket of currencies or pegged to a real asset. So this could basically roll out centralized virtual digital assets which are regulated by the central bank, which is under the purview of the government itself. So this is a major development that you should be aware of. You should be aware of the concept of stable coins. You should be able to explain this, compare it with regular crypto digital currencies. So take up this mains practice question. What are stable coins? Elaborate with examples of its global adoption. Very straightforward question. So in the introduction, you can explain what is a stable coin, or instead you can explain the rising adoption of stable coin, how it is seen as a more stable and a real asset. Then in the body, you can provide those details. You can provide the complete explanation of a stable coin in the body. Maybe draw a table as well, comparing a stable coin with regular cryptocurrencies. How the two are different. Maybe 2 to 3 points over here on both sides. 2 to 3 points, which can easily illustrate the differences between a stable coin and a crypto digital currency. Then talk about its increasing adoption. Give examples of US, Japan, Singapore, UAE, and others. Then finally point out in the conclusion that India should also consider introducing a stable coin which can supplement the central bank digital currency of the RBI. Both can be kept under the purview of the RBI, subjected to the regulations of the laws which are brought out by the government. So that can be your conclusion, which ensures that India will also be part of the change which is being seen in the global financial system. Right? Maybe you can even briefly discuss how India might lose out if we don't adopt the new trend, how it might affect future financial transactions, how it could impact capital flows across the world. So that one point can also be mentioned. So this would make for a good structured answer. So please use this question and the approach to practice your answer writing. Now let's look at the next article. This again is related to economy, the Indian economy. This editorial is focused on the scale of private investment, which is being seen in the Indian economy. When it comes to investments, there are two types: private investment and public investment. Public investment is nothing but the investment made by the government and government entities. Private investment is that investment made by the private capitalist industries. And this includes the investment made by domestic private companies and as well as by foreign private companies. Now, if you look at public investment, out of the total investments which are made in a financial year, the fresh investments which come in from the government accounts for roughly 32% of total investments, approximately. The remaining 68% of investments in our country is coming primarily from the private sector, both from domestic and foreign private investments. Now, as a percentage of GDP, private investment accounts for nearly 27% of India's GDP, making it very crucial to power industrial growth and economic activities in the country. So, of late, we are seeing a dichotomy which is developing between domestic private investment and foreign private investment. On one hand, domestic private investment is increasing, whereas foreign private investment has become stagnant and it has even started declining in the last few years. According to the latest data which is present here in the article, domestic private investment has jumped to almost 10 lakh crores for the fiscal year that was considered, the 2023-2024 fiscal. right, has seen a substantial jump in domestic investment, and especially the first half of this fiscal, the ongoing fiscal year, 2025-2026, around close to 10 lakh crores in investment has been committed by domestic Indian private companies. And the good news is that most of the investment which has been announced is in the manufacturing sector. Now, if you compare this with foreign private investment, it is diametrically opposite. It's like the polar opposite. Foreign investments are going down very drastically. It has stagnated and declined to a low of almost the last 5 years. It's one of the lowest extent of foreign investments that we have got into the country. Foreign private investment stands at just around 0.6 lakh crores for the first half of this fiscal. That's from April till now. In the first 2 quarters, foreign private investment has remained flat. And if you compare this with the data of last 3 to 5 years, it represents one of the lowest flow of investments into the country. So why are we seeing this difference? On one hand, domestic private investments are rising, reaching an all-time high, a high of almost last 15 years. Whereas foreign private investment is going down and remaining flat. See, this tells you about the confidence that the investors have in the Indian economy. This tells you that domestic companies, the domestic private sector, they have more faith and more confidence in the prospects of the Indian economy. They're confident that the Indian demand is likely to sustain and grow further. They're confident that Indian economy has shown a lot of resilience despite the global challenges. For example, the challenges created by COVID-19 pandemic, the global wars and the disruption to supply chains, and now the trade policies and the tariff wars of Donald Trump. Domestic investors believe that Indian economy has withstood all these challenges and hurdles, and Indian economy has performed phenomenally well despite these external global conditions. So domestic demand has remained resilient. It has shown that strength to withstand the impact of the global headwinds. And this is what gives confidence to the domestic private sector to invest more, bring more capital into the Indian economy. And a large part of these investments are going towards manufacturing, which is very good as it can create more jobs. But the same confidence is not held by foreign private investors. Foreign investors do not have the same level of confidence in the Indian economy. They are probably worried about the impact of the US tariff policy on Indian exports and India's potential. They believe that India is likely to take a big hit. And also, there is no clarity as to what will happen with regard to India US trade relations. So, given these facts, foreign private investors are largely staying away from the Indian economy, creating a diametrically opposite situation. Usually, private investors, be it domestic or foreign, they have the same perception of the economy and the state and the health of our economy. But today, you're seeing a clear dichotomy where domestic investors have greater faith in the resilience of the Indian economy, but foreign investors do not have the same level of faith. Now, it's very important to note that the government has reduced its capex. For the last few years, especially since COVID, the government had stepped up its capital expenditure. The government was plugging the shortage as private investments were drying up. It was the government which pumped more capital expenditure to drive the economy. But now the government is slowing down its investments. As of now, around 1.5 lakh crore investments have been announced by the government, which is substantially less compared to what we have seen in recent years. And the government has said that this is likely to be the trend. Going forward for the next few quarters at least, government capital expenditure will remain low and the government would look to scale it down. So with the government scaling down capital expenditure investments, foreign investors staying away from the Indian market, the entire responsibility will now shift to domestic private investors. So this is where government policy, ease of doing business, government regulation can play a critical role. This is going to be make or break for the Indian economy. If the government can come out with right policy support, right incentives, if it can simplify the regulation, encourage further investments from the private sector, then the domestic investors could still power the Indian economy. India can craft its own growth story, which could be completely different from the global conditions. There might be challenges at the global level, but Indian economy domestically will still outperform. And that will happen if domestic private investments are sustained. And for that, the right government support, the policy support is very, very necessary. So easing the process of doing a business, improving infrastructure, and simplifying the regulations, this would play a critical role. So that is what we take away from this important editorial. It gives us an insight into the current investment trends in the Indian economy. So based on this, take a practice question. Discuss the trends in domestic and foreign private investment in India. Such trend-based questions are often asked in the mains exam. So please be prepared for it. So to write a good answer, you need data. You should be aware of what's happening. Without that, you can't simply write generic arguments and you can't provide a very general analysis. That is not enough. That's why such articles can become important. Now, moving on, we have another important editorial that analyzes the 20-point peace plan that US President Donald Trump has proposed to bring the brutal Gaza war to an end. I'm sure many of you would have heard about this. Today, let's break this down. Let's discuss this topic in detail. We will go beyond the editorial. Editorial does not give much information, but don't worry, I will give you the complete explanation. We will discuss what does this plan entail for the Palestinians, for the people of Gaza in particular. Is the policy of US correct? Where does Israel stand in this regard? What about the other countries, the other stakeholders in this conflict? The Arab nations, for example. What is their stand on the 20-point peace plan? So let's break down all of this and understand this in detail. As you know, Donald Trump, he basically projects himself as the peacemaker in chief, right? He claims that he has resolved almost 8 conflicts already. At least 40 to 45 times he has said that he was the one who stopped the India-Pakistan conflict. And he has been desperately looking for Nobel Peace Prize nominations. Reports indicate he was even upset when India refused to nominate him for the Nobel Peace Prize. It's publicly known that Trump was very happy. His ego got a big boost when Pakistan nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize. So, this apart, Donald Trump has always projected himself as a leader who could intervene and resolve ongoing conflicts and wars. Even during his presidential campaign, he said that once he's elected to the White House, he will end the Gaza war and Ukraine war in 24 hours. This was the promise he had made, but clearly has not been able to deliver, right? The Ukraine war is unlikely to end anytime soon. And the only other option for Trump was to obsess about the war in Gaza and somehow try to bring this conflict to an end. But the 20-point peace plan that US is proposing is very, very problematic. Though it is projected as a peace deal, though it is projected as a much needed ceasefire to end the atrocities, to end the human suffering, and it is projected to benefit the Palestinian people eventually. But if you look at the terms, if you look at the provisions, the 20 points that are proposed, trust me, you will understand the fundamental problems that are present as part of this plan proposed by the United States. First, let me give you a quick assessment before we discuss these points one by one. This peace plan largely favors the interest of only one country, that is Israel. It largely favors Israeli interests, which obviously favors American interests as well. Given that US Israeli interests are perfectly aligned together, US is the one backing Israel throughout this war with financial support, arms and weapons, diplomatic support. This peace deal, if implemented, it will largely favor Israeli American interests. The deal has been tacitly supported by Arab nations. If not explicitly, the Arab nations as of now are extending a tacit support because, see, they want the war to end. They want the further destabilization of the region to be stopped. They know that they don't have the leverage against Israel or the United States. So all the Arab nations essentially want the conflict to end, and they don't care as to what happens with Palestinians. So whom does the deal affect? Obviously, the deal affects the Palestinian people the most. And what is unfortunate is that the deal doesn't include any role for Palestinians themselves to look after their own future, to determine the future affairs of Palestine. Very limited role has been envisaged for Palestinian stakeholders. This is a reminder of what the US did in Afghanistan with the Taliban. In 2020, when the same Trump administration struck a peace deal with the Taliban, the Doha Agreement, they basically gave a free pass to Taliban, allowing Taliban to take over the country in return for US quitting Afghanistan. But throughout the talks between US and Taliban, Afghan people and their own elected government was not even consulted. They were not even seen as stakeholders in the peace process. So basically, US negotiated with the enemy. They went to fight Taliban and Al Qaeda. They struck a deal with Taliban itself eventually. And not even once the people of Afghanistan, the elected civilian government of Afghanistan, was consulted in the process. We have seen something similar being proposed for Ukraine. How United States and Russia are sidelining Ukraine itself, the people of Ukraine, the government and the president. And they're trying to strike a deal between US and Russia to resolve the Ukraine conflict. So you are seeing a repeat of that, where Palestinians are excluded. Their role is minimal in the peace deal which has been brought out. Even in its eventual implementation, if at all it works out, there is hardly any role for Palestinians themselves. So outsiders and the powerful and the rich and the elite, they are determining the future of millions of people who have already suffered, not from 2 years of war, but from decades of oppression, decades of atrocities. So the editorial correctly points out that this peace plan is basically a type of neo-colonialism. It's like a new type of colonialism where the big powerful nations are defining as to what happens in a small region which does not belong to them. They are determining the fate of millions of people. So this largely benefits the interests of a few elite nations, a few powerful entities. Not only benefits Israel and US government interests, it also benefits the business interests which are aligned with these powers. So that is the fundamental problem with the deal. There is no role for Palestinians which is conceptualized. Palestinians are not seen as stakeholders in the peace process. So let's see what are the provisions. Now, before we discuss these 20 points and break it down one by one, Donald Trump has already given an ultimatum. That is, by tomorrow night, if Hamas does not accept the deal, if Hamas does not accept the deal by Sunday night, basically, the US is threatening Hamas that Israel would be given a free hand to go ahead with the dismantling of the Hamas and its terror network. Now, with this deadline in mind, let's understand what are the 20 points under this peace plan proposed by Donald Trump. Point number one, it proposes that Gaza would be a de-radicalized terror-free zone. This is a welcome step. See, there is no doubt that Hamas is an extremist organization. There is no doubt that Hamas has resorted to terrorist activities. What you saw on October 7th against Israel, innocent Israeli civilians, was nothing short of a brutal terrorist attack. That's how India has also seen the attack. Though India does not recognize Hamas as a terrorist organization, but the October 7th attack has been labeled by India as well as a terrorist attack against Israel. Hamas is known to be a brutal extremist actor. Hamas is known, it has been known to destabilize the region. It is largely playing a proxy war on behalf of Iran and essentially playing the game of Iran. So the time has come for Hamas to be dismantled. There is no doubt that Hamas is a roadblock for peace in Palestine. Hamas is a roadblock for the creation of a Palestinian state. In order to grant statehood to Palestine and to obtain international recognition for Palestine, the existence of Hamas is indeed a threat. It is a roadblock because nobody would be willing to recognize a Palestine which is ruled by Hamas, which is governed by an extremist authority. Now look at Gaza. In Gaza Strip, since 2006, since the elections of the Palestinian Authority, when Hamas defeated Fatah, since then, Hamas for nearly 2 decades has administered Gaza, and nobody comes ahead and recognizes Hamas as the legitimate Palestinian Authority. Because no country would be willing to recognize an extremist regime. And the time has really come to dismantle this extremist organization, which has caused more harm to Palestinian cause. It has caused more harm to Palestinian movement. So if the Palestinian state has to be created, if the two-state solution has to be realized, then Hamas has to go. So dismantling Hamas, ensuring Gaza is a de-radicalized terror-free zone is a much needed objective. But the point is, how are they going to achieve this? Yes, Israel has decimated the Hamas leadership. Hamas infrastructure has been decimated by the Israeli strikes. But Hamas and other Palestinian extremist groups, they are very resistant. There is every likelihood that they will revive in different forms. So just getting rid of Hamas for the time being will not ensure peace. It will not guarantee stability in this region. The next point says Gaza would be redeveloped for the benefit of people of Gaza. Now, this might remind you of a AI image and a video, a deep fake that Donald Trump himself had posted, which showed he and Netanyahu enjoying on the beaches of Gaza, which had been turned into a resort sort of destination. Trump had even said that Gaza can be turned into a prime real estate in the Middle East, similar to that of Dubai and other vibrant cities in the Middle East region. This had triggered a lot of controversy. So, redevelopment of Gaza, shouldn't this be determined by the people of Gaza, be it the reconstruction efforts? Because Israel has turned Gaza into dust. In the name of targeting Hamas and extremism, Israel has bombarded Gaza entirely through airstrikes and artillery bombardment. More than 65,000 people have been killed in a mindless, disproportionate war that Israel has been waging for the last couple of years. Israel stands accused of committing war crimes and genocide, with thousands of children, innocent children, being slaughtered and killed. And these Israeli attacks continue on a day to day basis. There are absolutely no restrictions, no checks on Israeli force, which is being disproportionately used against the population of Gaza. So, any redevelopment, it will not take off, it will not really work unless and until the fundamental issues are resolved. And more importantly, the redevelopment, the reconstruction effort should be determined by the people of Gaza, by the Palestinians themselves, not by other foreign entities, not by the oppressors. The 20-point peace plan also states that the war will end immediately. If Hamas accepts the deal and if other stakeholders also come around and they support the deal, then Israel promises on behalf of the US to end the war, to end the hostilities, at least for now. And Israeli forces, the IDF, will withdraw and they hold a certain line, which means Israeli military presence will continue, but their military operations will stop. Now, can you see the problem here? IDF will determine to what extent it will withdraw. It's not guaranteed that IDF will completely withdraw from Gaza. IDF will withdraw to a certain line, which is determined by Israel itself. So Israel itself will determine what will be the withdrawal, and they will maintain their military presence. To some extent, IDF presence will be present around Gaza, maybe on the perimeters and maybe in some crucial pockets, meaning Israel will retain the right to launch military strikes in the future as well. So the bombardment will stop as of now, the operations will stop, but that's not a guarantee for eternal peace. That's not a guarantee that the force will not be used again. So this is a tentative ceasefire which has been proposed essentially, which depends on the mood and wishes of Israel and its Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Then one of the important condition is that all hostages, deceased or alive, should be returned. This is a much welcome provision because from the start of the war, one of the key demands of Israel has been to ensure the return of all the hostages. Hamas had taken more than 200 hostages. Most of them have been killed. Some were returned, and there are few who are still alive in Hamas custody. So Hamas should return all these hostages. In return, Israel will also release the Palestinian prisoners, especially all the women and children who are in Israeli custody. So this exchange is much needed. Not just the hostages who are alive, even the dead bodies of the hostages, so that the families can have closure, they can pay their final respects, and release of the Palestinian prisoners who are in Israeli custody, including all the women and children prisoners who are held by Israel. They are supposed to be released under the deal, and this is a much needed. It's a much needed measure to bring some normalcy back as far as the conflict is concerned. Then Hamas would be given a free pass. The remnants of Hamas, if they surrender and if they lay down their arms, they will not be targeted by Israel. That's a commitment which is being made. Hamas leaders would be allowed to stay in Gaza if they want, or they can even seek refuge in another country which is willing to accept them. So they are being given an amnesty. Now, you tell me, once you grant amnesty, there is always a possibility that the dormant organization in the future could revive itself in a different form and continue the extremist activities. So there is a provision here where Hamas members, if they commit to end the violence and surrender and lay down their arms, they will not be targeted. They can remain in Gaza or they can seek asylum in another country which is willing to accept them. This again is a problematic provision. And finally, point number 7, as far as the first slide is concerned, humanitarian aid will be delivered, the much needed humanitarian aid. Because see, Israel has turned Gaza into an open air prison. More than 2.5 million people blockaded by Israel from all sides. Correct? Be it towards Israel, towards Egypt through the Rafah border crossing, or through the Mediterranean Sea, or be it towards Lebanon and the other parts of West Asia. In every corner, Israel has blockaded Gaza, turned it into an open air prison. The military blockade by Israel has ensured that no aid can reach. Few countries have tried airdropping the air aid material, but that is not enough to deal with the scale of the crisis. There is massive hunger. People are dying out of hunger. There are numerous health related challenges. The infrastructure has been decimated. The whole city has been turned into rubble, into basically ash and dust through the heavy bombardment of Israel. Recently, you might have heard how human rights organizations were trying to send a flotilla of ships to deliver humanitarian aid, and Israeli forces have targeted them, labeled them as terrorists for making an attempt to deliver humanitarian aid. So, this response of Israel shows that Israel has never been serious about delivering humanitarian aid to the people of Gaza. In the last 2 years of the conflict, there are recorded instances where Israel has deliberately targeted aid convoys and aid workers as well. It has deliberately blocked the delivery of food, water, and electricity, which are basic essentials. These acts qualify to be known as war crimes, crimes against humanity. They are against international law, and yet Israel has perpetuated these acts with absolutely zero accountability and zero consequences. So, whatever humanitarian aid will be delivered will largely again depend upon whether Israel would allow this to happen or not. There are no guarantees built into this. The deal says that United Nations and the Red Crescent, these would be the lead organizations to distribute aid. No other entities would be allowed. Volunteers will not be allowed. Human rights activists and organizations will not be allowed. But only the UN and the Red Crescent, which have the ability to deliver the aid, would be taking this lead role. But the point is, would Israel genuinely allow the delivery of aid? Would it really allow the reconstruction of Gaza? That remains unclear under the plan. But this point is very, very important. Now, who will oversee this implementation? See, forget all the promises being made. Promises can always be made. It's all about implementation. To implement, there must be some sort of authority. There must be someone to review that. So what is the structure, the governance mechanism being proposed by Trump? According to the 20-point peace plan, there will be a so-called board of peace. A board of peace acting as a international transition body. Since Hamas will be dismantled, it will no longer be the governing authority. The Palestinian Authority right now is in no state to govern Gaza. So Trump's proposal is that there will be an international body to oversee the governance and the implementation of the plan. The Board of Peace will be set up. And guess who will head this? Who will be the chair? Donald Trump himself. Donald Trump is struggling to deal with issues in the US. He's facing backlash and criticism for his own policies. What will Donald Trump do when it comes to Gaza and Palestine? So he's appointing himself as the chair, the head of the Board of Peace. And there would be a governing authority which would only comprise of international experts, a technocratic body. These are not popular leaders who are elected by Palestinians. In fact, Palestinian representation is absolutely minimal in this body. The governing body would be headed by, most likely, by the former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. The same Tony Blair who triggered an illegal war in Iraq with the then American President George Bush. So such individuals of questionable credentials are being given the lead role. And if you look at the names being proposed for the Board of Peace and the governing authority, you will be shocked. The names include Zionists. The names include billionaires who have a direct conflict of interest. They have a vested interest to perpetuate the subjugation of Palestinians. Such billionaires are being nominated to this board. And there is absolutely no oversight. This board will determine as to how the transition will happen and as to how Palestine would be reconstructed. The representation for Palestinians is very, very minimal, bare minimum. And there are few European officials being considered who might take a more balanced stand, but their authority would be minimal because their numbers are very small. Most of the board would comprise of pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, and pro-US individuals with a clear vested interest to profit out of this war, to profit out of the suffering of Palestinians. And that is where the fundamental problem lies. Now, this is what colonizers told their colonies. That look, we are better to govern your region. That we have better capability to administer your land. That we are doing this for your own good. Right? That's what all colonizers told their colonies. So this seems like neo-colonialism, where an international body is being conceptualized to govern a territory with absolutely zero local representation or popular representation. This was the practice that we saw during the World War period. During World War I and II, there were some territories which were administered by global bodies. For example, after Second World War, to manage the former colonies of the Axis powers, which were not ready for independence, the Trusteeship Council was set up under the UN to administer the trusteeship territories. So the United Nations, through the Trusteeship Council, was directly governing these trusteeship territories. So it's a reminder of that. It's a reminder of that colonial era, the World War period, where these foreign entities and governing bodies would govern a region with no local representation and no role for the local community. That is what Donald Trump is proposing. And the problems don't end here. Donald Trump is proposing an international security force, a coalition force to handle the security here. Since IDF will end its military operations to ensure that terrorism doesn't revive and Hamas doesn't revive itself, an international security force is being proposed as a coalition force. But the problem is the agreement does not mention which country will contribute. It does not mention the mandate. So how will this international security force be accountable? The proposal says that it would report to the UN Security Council, but we all know how the UN functions, how the UNSC functions. We have seen the horrors of such an international coalition force in Afghanistan, the NATO coalition, what they achieved in Afghanistan, right? So There's no guarantee that the story would be different in Gaza. And Trump is proposing such one coalition force with no commitment as to which countries are going to contribute. The most likely Arab nations, European countries would be roped in with US and some of its allies to contribute the troops. So Arab countries would be probably willing. They want the conflict to end. Countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, Kuwait, who knows, maybe even Pakistan, as it is very keen to play a role. They might contribute troops for such a coalition force. But the point is, can they really protect the interests of Palestinians? That is the question. This international stabilization force, a coalition security force which has been conceptualized, there are no checks, no accountability as far as its activities are concerned. And the other plus point is that US, Israel are committing that Palestinians will not be forced to leave Gaza. They need not be pushed out. They need not essentially leave the region, meaning they can stay back. Now, apart from two of the promises, everything else falls apart. There are only two positives here out of the 20 points: the ceasefire, the end of the war, which has been promised, and Gazans can stay back. They will not be forced out of their land. They will not be pushed out of Gaza. These are the only two positives for Palestinians, nothing else. And this is the bare minimum. They're promising the war will end, the horrific atrocities will stop, and Gazans will not be pushed to leave their homeland. They can stay where they are. Apart from this, everything else falls apart, and even that is not guaranteed whether it will be properly implemented. It all depends on whether the other countries will support its implementation. There's no timeline. There is no authority to review its functioning and implementation. Right? As I said, US Israeli interests are being fulfilled. Interests of billionaires is being fulfilled. But the interest of Palestinians has the least priority in this 20-point peace plan. You can go through the other minor provisions, but in totality, this appears to be a deal which is one-sided, a type of a neo-colonial, neo-imperial agenda. And that is where the problem lies. So it would be interesting to see what happens next. Is that clear? So let's wait and watch whether the war will continue, whether there would be an end. Will the peace plan work? Maybe will Donald Trump get his peace prize? Next, on page 6, there's another interesting article today. This is related to the learnings from Operation Sindoor and what developments are taking place between India and Pakistan to prepare for the potential next conflict between India and Pakistan. The writer is exploring the maritime theater, the maritime domain, which has gained a lot of traction after Operation Sindoor. During Operation Sindoor, India clearly established its aerial dominance. Operation Sindoor was largely a conflict fought on land and in the air, with the aerial component being the most important component in the conflict, and India clearly establishing its military superiority, its conventional superiority over Pakistan. But there was another domain during Operation Sindoor which was silently active. Though the entire focus of the conflict was on the land component and the air component, there was another silent domain where India and Pakistan were making some decisive moves. Though there was no direct naval confrontation, Indian Navy adopted an offensive deterrent posture, which was basically designed to keep Pakistani Navy blocked in the Karachi port at the Karachi naval base. The Indian Navy was deployed into a forward position. Though direct strikes did not happen, the Indian Navy had basically set up a blockade of sorts, ensuring that Pakistani Navy doesn't have the flexibility to move out of Karachi. And the sites were set by the Indian Navy, if necessary, to launch direct strikes on Pakistani Navy and its naval assets. So the Indian posture during Operation Sindoor, the naval posture we maintained, was that of offensive deterrence, which means the Navy did not play a direct role in the conflict, but it was playing a role behind the scenes, maintaining that deterrent posture and showing that offensive intent from the Indian side. But next time, when there is a conflict between India and Pakistan, the navies may not remain silent. That's the whole point of this article. There are very clear signs coming from Pakistan, coming from India as well, that the next major conflict between India and Pakistan will have a significant naval component. Let's understand this in slight detail. See, during Operation Sindoor, when Indian Navy had effectively locked up the Pakistani Navy at Karachi, Pakistan, which feared a possible Indian attack, moved its critical naval assets to Gwadar port. From Karachi, some of the key Pakistani naval assets, especially its missile destroyers, submarines, corvettes, these critical assets of Pakistani Navy, they were moved out of Karachi port and they were shifted towards the Gwadar naval base. Now, this itself was a very important move by Pakistan. And I'll explain that in a short while. Why the shift from Karachi to Gwadar is important. How does it account for in our calculations? Now, apart from this, we also saw a lot of new inductions by both India and Pakistan to add to their naval fleet after Operation Sindoor. There is a lot of new exercises, new capacities which the two navies have built up in the last 4 to 5 months. That is, after May 2025, Indian Navy has been super active. So is Pakistani Navy. They have been super active. You may not hear about it much, but the signs are very, very clear. They are prepping their capabilities. They are sending out clear messages. They are basically telling the other side that next time don't dare trigger a naval conflict. India is sending out such signals. Pakistan also is sending out such signals. For example, Indian Navy has inducted key frontline assets such as the INS Nistar, which is capable of carrying diving support crew and vessels, which can enable submarine operations. Indian Navy has inducted frontline warships in the last few months, and some of them which have been deployed out in the sea, in the Arabian Sea in particular, they have been conducting aggressive maneuvers. They're involved in training exercises in order to send out a message that Indian Navy is more than prepared for the next conflict. Also, there is that growing pressure to do something different. Imagine next time there is a brutal terror attack against India. Right now, India has already tried out some of the options. During the Uri attacks, we carried out a surgical strike using special forces. After the Pulwama attacks, we carried out Balkot airstrikes using the Air Force, which was a limited airstrike. Then after the Pahalgam attack, India unleashed Operation Sindoor, hitting the terror infrastructure directly and later retaliating against Pakistani military infrastructure. But next time, there would be added pressure on India to open a new front, the maritime front. So this is where things get both interesting and challenging for India. See, India should be very mindful of the capabilities of Pakistani Navy. You can't dismiss the capabilities of Pakistani Navy today. Yes, in 1971, Indian Navy delivered a crushing defeat to Pakistan. Pakistan was largely unprepared. It was also outmatched and outnumbered by Indian Navy. But today, Pakistani Navy is quite formidable. Are you aware that today Pakistani Navy has frontline Chinese warships and submarines in its arsenal? Chinese built warships and submarines are part of the Pakistani Navy's fleet. For example, the Hangor class of submarines, considered to be one of the most lethal submarine vessels in the world today. China has provided the Hangor class submarines, which Pakistani Navy has inducted. Then Pakistan has developed its own naval ballistic missiles that can attack ships, that can even take out shore-based targets. Pakistani Navy has strengthened its firepower through an indigenous ballistic missile, a ship-launched ballistic missile which it has developed, and it can be used to take out ships and shore-based targets. Pakistan has invested heavily in its radar, communication, intelligence network, and surveillance capabilities. It has the American P-8 Poseidon, the C-130J Super Hercules, which adds to the surveillance capabilities of Pakistan. Right? It has even received naval vessels from Turkey. Turkey has become a key supplier today, and recently it has supplied a corvette to Pakistan. And in the coming days, you can expect Turkey to keep providing that logistical support and supply arrangements, especially during times of conflict. So there is China on one side, there is Turkey on the other side, providing constant supply of advanced naval technology. Pakistan has even access to Chinese satellites. And don't forget the role of drones, how drones can play a decisive role in a naval battle. Though India has the conventional edge, Pakistan can always take India by surprise. We have seen in the Ukraine conflict, the naval component of the Ukraine war between Russian and Ukrainian navy has been very, very dramatic and interesting. Though Russian navy is much stronger and outnumbers the Ukrainian navy, Ukrainian naval forces and intelligence agencies have delivered significant blows to Russian navy, basically by the clever, creative usage of drones and by using better technology and better maneuvers. They have been able to outsmart the Russians. So there is a possibility that Pakistan might be able to pull that off, and India cannot be complacent. Though we have the edge, we still retain the conventional superiority. India should be mindful that the gap between Indian Navy, Pakistani Navy is closing very quickly because of the support coming from China and Turkey. The other important point is that China may not remain a silent back-end player in a future conflict against Pakistan, especially if there is a naval maritime confrontation. If, let's say, Karachi or Godar is struck by Indian Navy, then most likely the PLA Navy is likely to step in. If not directly, the PLA Navy would definitely secure Pakistani interests. The plan, the People's Liberation Army Navy, has maintained a constant presence at Gwadar, which is part of the CPEC project. So, as India had predicted, CPEC is not just a commercial economic project, not just a transport hub. It clearly has a military strategic dimension. Pakistan was very clear from the beginning that Chinese involvement at Gwadar would give Pakistan the edge over India in case of a naval confrontation like the one we saw in 1971. Though India has the superiority, Pakistan can take shelter at Gwadar, and it would be very difficult for India to target Gwadar directly because you would be taking aim at Chinese investments, at Chinese military personnel, and possibly Chinese naval assets, which could potentially escalate the conflict. And also, military experts believe that it is much harder to control the escalation in the maritime domain. Escalation control is not easy when it becomes a sea based battle. When you look at land based battle, aerial battles, escalation control is always available. You can test your enemy defenses and pull back. But escalation control is much, much more difficult in the maritime theater. And there is always the possibility of miscalculations, which could quickly escalate into a bigger conflict. There are multiple variables at play. Because, see, don't forget, Pakistan is not the only concern for us. Indian Navy's priority right now is to dominate the Indo Pacific, to ensure we counter China and deal with all the other threats across the Indo Pacific. You might have heard about the recent naval deployments of Indian Navy in Philippines, in Southeast Asia and East Asia. This is part of India's growing naval presence to counter China, to counter the PLA Navy, and to establish our deterrence across Indo Pacific. So, if we get bogged down by Pakistan and the Pakistani Navy, then it could create a challenge for India's Indo Pacific ambitions. So, right now, both sides are sending out these messages through their exercises, training missions, and maneuvers that they're trying to create a deterrent. And in the future, they'll not hesitate to take up offensive steps against the other. So, most likely, the next conflict between India and Pakistan will involve a serious naval component, a possible maritime battle. India is more than prepared, but the challenge is Pakistan is also gearing up with better equipment and capabilities, with support coming in from China and Turkey. So, this is what India will have to keep in mind when the war plans and the military doctrines are conceptualized. So, let's move on to the prelim section. Let's go through the small articles, and after that, we can end the session. In this article on the front page, habeas corpus is mentioned. What is habeas corpus? The habeas corpus petition is in the news because the activist from Ladakh, Sonam Wangchuk, was leading the protest for more autonomy and statehood, has been arrested, detained by the authorities following the violence in Ladakh. Since his detention, nobody has a clue as to where Sonam Wangchuk is. Right? There has been no public information shared by the authorities, and he has been held in custody. So his wife has approached the court and filed a habeas corpus petition. So, what exactly is habeas corpus? Habeas corpus is one of the writ petition, one of the writs available under Article 32 to 26 as a constitutional remedy. It's one of the constitutional remedy that's available to safeguard your fundamental rights, to ensure that the state does not abuse its power and authority and violate your fundamental rights. There is this remedy and safeguard provision provided through the writ jurisdiction of the courts. So, under the writ jurisdiction, the Supreme Court and High Court, under Article 32 to 26 respectively, they can exercise the power of judicial review to protect and safeguard your fundamental rights. This is the remedy offered by the Constitution. Now, as you are aware, the Constitution guarantees right to life under Article 21. Correct? There is constitutional protection against detention as well. To ensure that the state is not misusing the authority and power that has been given to it to threaten your life through to carry out illegal detentions. There is a petition, habeas corpus. In Latin, it's a Latin term, obviously. It literally translates to have the body off. Now, let's say a person has been detained. Could be by the state, by the authorities, by the police, or it could be even be by a private individual. This right applies for both public and private individuals. If a person has been detained and if they're not sharing the information as to where the person is, then through the habeas corpus petition, through this writ petition, the court can order the government to have the body of that person, to basically bring that person to the court, present the person before the court to ensure that person is safe. His life is not threatened, he's not tortured, he's not been beaten. The court will examine the reasons, the legality behind the detention or the arrest. And if the state can't prove, the court can even order the person to be released immediately. This is one of the most powerful writ petitions that's available, one of the most important constitutional remedy that protects you against arbitrary detention and ensures that your basic constitutional rights are protected. Right? The courts can issue this writ ordering the government, the state, to have the body of that person, to present that person in the court itself, and establish whether there are compelling reasons to keep that person in detention or in custody. If the state can't prove that, and the court determines that the detention was illegal, the court can order the immediate release of that person as well. Next, there is a image on the front page of the Hindu, which is taken at the Tadoba Andhari Tiger Reserve. So let's quickly talk about the Tadoba Andhari Tiger Reserve. The facts can be important for your prelims. This protected area, which is a key tiger habitat, it's located in the Chandrapur district of Maharashtra, closer to the border with Madhya Pradesh. So it's located in central India and it's one of the key tiger habitats. So Tadoba is a national park. Andhari is a wildlife sanctuary. These two protected areas were brought together in 1995 to establish Tadoba Andhari Tiger Reserve. So under Project Tiger, this is one of the key tiger habitats with a very healthy tiger population. And this protected area is also home to a forest dwelling tribal community. In fact, the very word Tadoba is taken from the name of god Tadoba or Taru, worshipped by the local forest dwelling tribes, the Gondi people. The Gondi are native to this region. Yeah? And the Tadoba Andhari Tiger Reserve, both the national park and wildlife sanctuary which is present here, has a very rich biodiversity of both flora and fauna. Now, if you look at the major animals and the other species that are found. It's not just the tiger. You also have the Indian leopard, sloth bears, gaur, nilgai, the dhole, the small dogs, the small Indian civet, sambar deer, barking deer, cheetal, chausinga, and the others. So these are some of the important species, including crocodiles, which are found over here. Just take a note of the important species found in this habitat. Next, another environment ecology topic, the CAQM, the Commission for Air Quality Management in the Delhi NCR region, has issued an order. It has directed the district commissioner, the DC, the DM essentially, of Punjab, Haryana, and the Delhi NCR region to take immediate strict action against local officials if they fail to prevent stubble burning. Because don't forget, the paddy harvest season has started in northern and northwestern part of India, and the stubble which is left behind, usually it will be burnt by the farmers, and it is this burning of the stubble which releases a lot of particulate matter in November, December, January, which contributes to significant air pollution and smog condition in the Delhi NCR region. So to tackle this menace, this environmental threat, the CAQM was set up as a statutory body in 2021 through the Commission for Air Quality Management in the National Capital Region. This authority has the mandate to maintain the air quality in the Delhi NCR region. It can even place restrictions on economic activities. It is responsible for implementing the GRAP, Graded Response Action Plan, during the peak smog season. That's usually between November to Jan, even extending up to February. As per the Graded Response Action Plan, the Commission for Air Quality Management can issue executive orders to ban and prohibit and restrict some of the economic activities, from restricting the movement of vehicles to ordering the shutdown of power plants, ordering the closure of industries and factories, and even giving orders to stop construction, to stop triggering fires. All such orders can be issued by this authority. So, this authority is comprised of a chairperson who has served as a secretary or as a chief secretary. A senior government official of the rank of secretary, chief secretary, is appointed as a chairperson. And there are five ex officio members, either the chief secretaries of all the concerned states or those who are serving in the ranks of secretaries from respective states, which is UP, Punjab, Haryana, then Rajasthan, and Delhi. These are the stakeholders in combating the air pollution in this region. So there is official representation from all the concerned states. There are non-government members, technical experts. Then representation is also given for ISRO, Central Pollution Control Board, and Niti Aayog. So it has a good mix of official, non-official, and technical experts as part of the composition. So this is the role, the composition, and the mandate of CAQN. Coming to the last article for today, Poland has decided to join NATO's pipeline system, the NPS. This is a very important topic, so please pay attention to this one. What is NATO pipeline system? The NATO pipeline system is a fuel network that NATO countries have set up during the Cold War period. During the heights of the Cold War, when the Western NATO allies anticipated a conflict with the Eastern Bloc led by Soviet Union, they established the NATO pipeline system, which is basically a network of pipelines that crisscrosses across Europe, especially Western and Northern and Southern parts of Europe, that can transport fuel and lubricant to meet the military requirements of the NATO troops. In case of a war, right, there would be a urgent, immediate requirement for massive quantities of fuel to power the military vehicles and lubricants to power the military hardware. So, to ensure that there is an uninterrupted supply of fuel and lubricants during wartime, NATO has created a 10,000 kilometer network of these pipelines connecting Western Europe with the Baltic states and Central Europe and southern parts of Europe. But however, Eastern Europe is largely unconnected because this network was created during Cold War period in the 1970s and 80s. It was only after the collapse of Soviet Union, after 91, after the Cold War ended, that Eastern countries in Europe also started joining NATO. So countries like Poland, they joined NATO following the collapse of the Soviet Union and end of the Cold War. But Poland is not part of this fuel network, the pipeline system. Now that Russia is regularly carrying out incursions, right? Russian drones, Russian fighter jets, and even Russian missiles have repeatedly breached the airspace of Poland and many other countries, including the Baltic states and the Scandinavian countries. NATO defenses are being tested. So Poland is preparing for any eventuality and it has announced its decision to join this pipeline system. So Poland will be constructing a 300-kilometer pipeline network to link with the NATO pipeline system in Germany. From Germany to Poland, a 300-kilometer pipeline would be set up, which will help in transporting fuel and lubricants to supply the NATO frontline troops, the NATO bases that are located in Poland. So that is the key development that you need to note down. So on this point, let me end the class. Let me end the discussion. I hope you have understood everything. If you like the session, do press the like button, share your comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching.